Steph Curry's NBA career was at a crossroads when he played in just 26 games during the 2011-2012 season after a string of ankle sprains and 2 surgeries to his right ankle. Instead of becoming Grant Hill 2.0, Curry was able to turn his glass ankles into a solid foundation for what would become one of the greatest three-point shooters of all time. Welcome back everyone to your #1 source for a unique medical perspective on the world of sports. Today I'm going to explain not just what Steph Curry did to help prevent more ankle sprains, but why it actually worked and why he did it. Make sure you stay till the end because I'm going to go over some specific exercises and rehab principles that you should keep in mind if you're trying to strengthen your ankles and hopefully prevent ankle sprains from happening. Please consider subscribing if you're new here and want to stay up to date with my future videos. Let's get started. The sprains themselves occur in 2 different patterns. We first have contact ankle sprains where someone steps on another player's foot, and we also have non-contact, which is when you're just running down the court or changing directions and you catch and roll your ankle without actually stepping or making contact with another player. In both of these situations, whenever that abnormal movement occurs, the ankle is trying to react as quickly as possible to provide some support and stability and prevent the player from rolling it even further, causing more damage to those ligaments. Now, in order to prevent this from happening, our body has passive and active stabilizers within the ankle joint. The passive stabilizers are simply there and can't move or adapt or adjust what they're doing, and these are things like the natural contours of the bones in the joints and the ankle ligaments themselves. But we also have active stabilizers, and these are primarily the muscles around the ankle joint that are able to fire and contract at different times to provide additional support to the ankle whenever it's needed. On the passive side, he of course underwent surgery to try and tighten and clean up those ligaments, and he also started wearing ankle braces to provide some passive external support. So we know that before all this, Curry had very weak hips, and strengthening his hips was a big part of his rehab. If we think about how a player's center of mass, especially someone like Curry's, changes while they play, we can then understand better why hip strengthening can be effective here. Whenever Curry is changing directions with his dribble, what's essentially changing very quickly is the location of his center of mass, or sort of where all of his body weight is centrally located within his person. Every time he cuts and plants going from one side to the other, his center of mass is shifting as well from one side to the other, and his body has to be able to control the change of direction with all of that momentum. If he's dribbling to the right and then he plants to push off and go to the left, all of his center of mass momentum is continuing to go towards the right in that direction and then has to be changed over to the left. Otherwise, his body's going to just fall over and continue on to the right and lead to more things like these sprains. So by strengthening his hip muscles, he's able to take some of that load and responsibility away from his ankles and away from the lower part of his kinetic chain and rely on the strength of his glutes and his other hip muscles to help with controlling exactly how his center of mass is shifting throughout the court as he does all those quick cuts and dribble moves. Now, unfortunately, as we'll discuss, oftentimes just pure strength training isn't enough to adequately help with strengthening your ankles to prevent sprains. We'll get into some of the different proprioception and balance exercises that are important, but first, I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's video. Today's video is sponsored by The Ridge, the company behind this awesome product, the Ridge Wallet. If you're like me, then your old wallet used to just accumulate card after card that you never actually ended up using. Now, thanks to the Ridge Wallet, I'm able to have a sleek, professional, and efficient front pocket wallet that allows me to carry just the absolute essentials as well as some spare cash. All of their wallets are made with really high quality materials in a number of different styles that give you a lot of different options to choose from to get that perfect look. They have options for a money strap on the back for that extra cash, or my preference, a traditional style money clip. I have to wear a suit to work every day, and having something so slim and professional looking like the Ridge Wallet is really a huge bonus. Head over now to ridge.com/BrianMD to get 10% off your order with free worldwide shipping and free returns. Once again, that's ridge.com/BrianMD. Check out the link down in the description below. A huge thank you again to the Ridge for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back to our learning.
The first thing I want to talk about is how to strengthen the important muscles in the hip. One of the specific ways they knew Curry was so weak was because of an exercise they had him do where he basically tried to balance on one leg while bending over forward and basically fell over. I'm not very good at it either. So the big muscle that we try to strengthen in the hips are the hip abductors, and specifically it's muscle called the glute medius. It sits right on the outside portion of your hip, and basically what it does is it abducts your leg, which means lifts it outward. Whenever someone is standing on just one leg, those hip abductor muscles here on the side are what's activating to try to keep us from falling over to one side or the other. There's a couple of common exercises you'll see done to strengthen these hip abductors. What you can do is get some of these resistance bands, and the first exercise you can do is basically putting the resistance band down around your ankles and then doing shuffle walks from one side to the other. What this is going to do every time you step out is it's going to activate those hip abductors, and then whenever your opposite foot comes back in, you're also activating those abductors to control the leg moving back inward. The other thing you can do too is simply stand in place and just work on lifting that leg out to the side, again activating those hip abductor muscles. Now, of course, we can't forget about the glute maximus, which is the big butt muscle, and those muscles are predominantly involved with hip extension. Hip extension is whenever we're bent forward and then we extend our hips to bring them back out this way. A lot of people think of doing back squats to strengthen your glute maximus, but actually the best exercise to specifically activate your glute maximus is to do a traditional bridge style of exercise. Unfortunately, though, just doing a bunch of squats and strengthening our hip muscles isn't enough to prevent these types of injuries. We also have to, of course, think about what's going on down at the ankle, specifically with our strength and our range of motion, and specifically trying to get rid of any asymmetries from one side to the other. In general, the presence of asymmetries throughout the body are a risk for getting injured, and we can even look back at a couple of the plays where Steph sprained his ankle and see that it was possible that some limited range of motion with dorsiflexion of his ankle could have caused his toes to get caught and to make him trip up on the court, which would have then led to the sprain. One quick and easy thing to do is to check and see how tight your calf muscle and Achilles complex is from one side to the other by simply using a flat wall. What you want to do is start with your toes against the wall, and you want to be able to bend down until your knee makes contact with the wall. Gradually keep moving your foot further and further back until you get to a point where your heel starts to lift up off the ground in order to make contact with the wall. So go just as far back as possible where you can still make contact with the wall and measure that spot, and then check on the other side to see if you're at a similar location. If you find a big difference from one side to the other, then you know that you need to work on strengthening your calf muscle and that whole Achilles complex to get rid of that asymmetry. Now, just like we want to work on strengthening the muscles around our hips, we also need to make sure we address strengthening the actual muscles around the foot and ankle that are controlling that inversion and eversion. To do this, again, we can use our simple resistance bands. All you have to do is loop the resistance band around the ends of your foot, and if we want to first work on our right foot, what we can do when we push the resistance band out is that's strengthening our everter muscles. You can see the muscles here on the outside of the leg firing. Those are primarily your peroneus longus and peroneus brevis. I can then switch and then go on and do the left side, again working on that foot eversion. Now, to work on our foot inverter strengthening, specifically your posterior tibialis muscle, you're just going to push the foot in the opposite direction. Now, this is a little bit hard to do if you don't have something to loop your resistance band around, but just by holding on to it here, you can see whenever I invert, I'm pushing my foot inwards, firing that tibialis posterior muscle and strengthening those foot inverters. Those ankle inverters and everters are really key in that active component of stabilization around the ankle whenever it's getting one of that uneven loads suddenly through it, like stepping on someone's foot, to try to fire to help counteract the motion of the ankle and prevent the sprain from occurring. So we've talked about hip strengthening, foot and ankle strengthening, and range of motion and stretching, but there's one other really key aspect that you're going to read about when it comes to trying to exercise to prevent ankle sprains, and that's really working on our proprioception and our dynamic balance control. Remembering back to what I was saying about controlling the movement of that center of mass, again, that's all about controlling your balance and trying to keep that center of mass from shifting and making such big movements as best as possible. And so what we're going to do is work on ways to train that so that all those different little muscle groups that have to fire can sort of build up that feedback pathway and that plasticity in the brain. And you heard about neuromuscular training. That's what we're trying to do when we work on these different balance exercises. The key here is to work on a progression of introducing gradually more challenging balance activities as your body becomes more accustomed to this type of training. It's also really important when you do these types of balance exercises to actually do them without shoes or socks on, because what that's going to do is it's going to cause all of your little foot muscles to have to work harder to control your balance, as opposed to if you've got a shoe on, you don't have to work those muscles as much. To start off with, you're going to work on maintaining your balance while standing on just one foot with your eyes open and your hands on your waist. As you'll probably find out, this isn't all that challenging. It might be harder to do based on which foot your dominant side is, but this is a pretty basic example. Here you don't see all that much movement in my hips. You don't see that much movement in my foot or my ankle, occasionally a little bit of a jerk there. But overall, this is a pretty easy exercise to do. Now, once you're able to maintain your balance like this on both feet, one at a time, next what you can do to make it harder is go and close your eyes. Whenever you close your eyes, you remove that visual feedback that's gonna help, and you can already tell how much harder it is. And so hopefully what you're seeing here are all the different little movements in my foot muscles, the movements of my hip, my upper body, as I work to try to maintain my balance. So what you're doing when you train that is you're establishing that neuromuscular control and working on that feedback of how your muscles in your foot, your knee, your quads, your hips, your upper body all need to react to those fine little changes in direction throughout your foot to prevent the big major movement that you see with an ankle sprain. The next thing you can do to really take this up a notch is get something like a balance board or a wobble board. What you can do is put this on the ground, and this is going to give you sort of an extra challenge of trying to maintain your balance. So you can initially begin by just standing with both feet on it, and already this is more challenging than what we see with both feet flat on the ground. You can see all the small little movements that I'm having to do as I change directions and try to maintain my balance on this. One thing you can even do with these boards is intentionally work on going forward on it, coming backwards on it, coming to the side, and then coming to the other side to, again, work on how you're going to train all those muscles to get through this type of an activity, and then progress to closing your eyes. And you can see it is so much harder to do this with your eyes closed compared to keeping your eyes open. So when your eyes are closed, you're relying more on all your muscles and that feedback coming up through your feet and legs. And it's really tough. I have a really hard time with it. But you can progress through these types of things, and as you're training this, your balance is getting better, your dynamic support control is getting better with those muscles, and these are the types of things that have been shown to help reduce the risk of ankle sprains and having recurrent ankle sprains. One of the last things that athletic trainers and a lot of research will talk about is adding in sport-specific movement and what we call perturbations to make this even harder of an activity. So if you're a basketball player, while you're on a balance board like this, get a basketball and start doing some dribbling. You can have someone do a chest pass with you, and what that's going to do, if the ball is out here, you're going to have to react, and all of those reactions are going to be fed down all the way to the board, where your ankles and your feet are working on maintaining that postural control. Sometimes the athletic trainers or therapists will give your upper body a little bit of a push, and so now you have to again react to that external stimulus, and what it's trying to do is again mimic all that stuff that you're going to see during a basketball game. When Steph is getting knocked or bumped, those are all little movements that his body has to adapt to, and so doing things like that while you're on something like this balance board are again going to help you train those muscles and help reduce the risk of getting sprains. I am not very good at that. So the other thing, if you don't have a balance board like that, is you can get a piece of foam or a big soft pillow, something that's got some cushion to it that you can stand on, and it's going to give you a little bit of variation that sort of mimics these same types of drills. There's no one size fits all for what types of these activities to do and how many to do and how frequently to do them. The idea is to just find something that works for you. Pick up one of these cheap balance boards, get some resistance bands, work on your balance, and then as you improve your balance, gradually make it more difficult with things like dribbling a basketball, having someone give you little pushes or shoves that you have to react to, do things with your eyes closed, whatever you can do to sort of take it up a level of difficulty and then add in your sport-specific activities are really going to help you work on training those muscles to prevent ankle sprains. Also talk to with your coaches, your athletic trainers, your therapists, because they likely have read about and know about these types of activities and drills and can definitely get you hooked up with a more specific, detailed program that works just for you.
That's it for the video, everybody. Thank you as always for watching, and let me know any questions or comments below. And until next time, we'll see you later.